Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my long-awaited guest, I'm so psyched that this came together in such a hurry, is Kerry Healey, PhD, an internationally recognized leader in higher education and public policy, is the inaugural president of the Center for Advancing the American Dream in Washington, D.C., as she's also served as president of Babson College, the 100-year-old business school consistently ranked as the leader in entrepreneurship education. She previously served as Massachusetts lieutenant governor under Governor Mitt Romney at the time, when did amazing things there. She's been a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, Institute of Politics, and Center for Public Leadership, and is on the International Council of the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. You have an AB in government from Harvard, a PhD in political science, and law from Trinity College, Dublin. And you're also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a trustee of the American University of Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Kerry Healey.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Well, thank you, Deke. I'm excited to be able to be on your show. You're a hero of mine.
Well, but you are to me, and Lieutenant Governor, you are a true public servant. And you were born in Omaha, Nebraska. You grew up in Florida. Your father was in the military. I believe he'd been in World War II, as was my father as well. But what really stoked in you an interest in government? Because I think for me and you, it's more, I know for me it was more government, not necessarily the ugly partisan politics side that continues to get progressively worse.
No, I think that's exactly right. There are two parts of public service. One is the politics to get there, and the other is the governing. And the governing is so important and so interesting once you dig in, because you can't impact people's lives any more than being a public servant who deals with the daily challenges of people's lives. So certainly at a mayoral level, you're right, in the trenches doing that. And I believe also at the a governor's level, you really are able to have that impact. So what got me excited about it was the problem solving piece and the idea that you could have massive impact if you could just find the right way to solve a problem and then also implement it properly. And that implementation piece is something that is just ignored by most people. Most people think like, yep, I thought up the solution. Let's go back to sleep now.
Oh, yes.
And I actually, I had the opportunity to teach policy implementation last semester at Princeton. And it was such an interesting exercise because I realized that while thinking up the solutions and finding the right solution is really hard, but the real tough piece is making sure it happens and that the solutions stick and that there aren't unexpected twists and turns that happen along the way as a result, those unintended consequences. Absolutely. So for me, that's what drags me in again and again, gets me back into this sphere, just that challenge of, how do you actually effectively solve problems?
It's interesting because I've been out of office for 10 years, but I've always been, interested in politics. I ran my first campaign successfully this year, have just become a part of the Forward Party as an advisory board member. But that you and I are identical on that because I love the problem solving. So I tell people I grew up writing and painting with an arts education. So the arts teaches you creative problem solving. And I think too often in politics, it's either black or white, A or B, but really coming up with the solutions and getting it implemented is very difficult. And I think most young people, we need to teach civics again because they don't realize. I'll just give you an example. When I was in office, so I posted on social media, we finally have bike racks on buses. And somebody said, well, what's so great about that? I said, well, first, I had to build consensus within the governing body that we needed bike racks on buses. Then we had to apply for a federal grant to get the funding for the bike racks on buses. Then we had to go out for bid. So it's not like just one day I say, hey, bike racks on buses is a great idea, and it just happens. I mean, these things take time and diligence and curiosity, I think.
That's right, and very often, and I think we see this, and we're so disappointed in it. We see people who are good at getting elected,
Yeah.
but then once they get there, they don't know what to do. They haven't really put that time and effort into thinking about what's my personal philosophy, what's my value system that I'm bringing to this, what are the kinds of things I'd really like to accomplish. And if you come into office with maybe one or two goals in mind, the likelihood that you're going to succeed is much greater than if the idea that you came into office with is, I'd like to be in office. I think I could,
Yeah.
really sort things out if only I knew what that was. You have to be a different type of person to be effective in office rather than just perpetually get reelected and actually not be able to do anything.
So I'm very fortunate because here in Georgia, all local races are nonpartisan. So I've never been a part of either political party, and I think it's a great situation because if you maintain that focus on not leaning to one side or the other or aligning yourself with the party, you can actually govern to the middle without governing to the extremes and worry about a party getting you reelected. But the way I got interested in politics is I had a professor, political science professor in college. His name was Ralph Walker, and he actually passed 2 days ago at the age of 94. But I was writing something, I was being interviewed about him. I said, one of the things that always stuck with me is he said, people running for office should focus on never being too highbrow and never being too lowbrow. And I thought, that's kind of sad because that was my focus in 3 campaigns. I'm like, speak directly to the people in terms they can understand, not, sound bites and rhetorics that just inflame them, actually try to educate them. But I thought now it's kind of like the lowbrow seems to be in vogue to a large degree when we consider that there are people in Congress, one that might be from my state of Georgia that basically misbehave and then send out fundraising emails. So I'm like, and that goes back to, it's good that you can get elected because you can raise all this money, but can you really govern? And what can you show me that you did?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the science is there that shows us that if you make someone angry, if you make them afraid, they're more likely to be impassioned enough to go to the polling booth and vote for that person because they feel that they're going to protect them from these fears that they've aroused in them or this anger that they've aroused toward another group. And the Forward Party, as you know, you and I are both members of the Forward Party now, and I have the great fortune to be the sort of executive chairman of that effort. And one of the things we don't want to do is we don't want to arouse those negative passions in voters. And yet, how do you move a voter without making them afraid, without making them angry? You have to ask them to elevate themselves a bit. We have to go back to that place that isn't too highbrow or too lowbrow, but is like right there in the middle where we say, let's get things done. Government is not entertainment. Government is where things should actually happen. And the fact that we've created the situation where government now is entertaining and people are really engaged with it, but in a bad way, because what they've done is they've started going down to that lowest common denominator. And we need to raise it back up again. We need to bring people into government like you and honestly, like Mitt Romney, who I ran with, who are interested in serving because they are public servants and who are always going to have their ethics no matter what, and they are not going to compromise their views on something just because of political expediency. And that's a hard mix to get. We've seen all of our politicians tested recently to see who has integrity and who doesn't. And we at Forward are saying, if you've got integrity and you want to speak your mind and you don't agree with us on everything, but that's okay. As long as you have integrity and you can follow our general principles about how we'd like to see people conduct themselves in public life, come on in.
Well, it's interesting. I wrote a best-selling book a couple years ago called "The Change Maker: The Art of Building Better Leaders." So it's on leadership, but people thought you're a former politician. Of course, it's about politics. But I was speaking at an engagement locally, and a gentleman said, "What's at the core of your book?" I said, "It's that in leadership positions, even in politics, you can maintain your character and integrity and treat everybody with dignity and respect and still be successful." And the guy said, "Well, I can't wait to read it because I don't believe that's possible," which is so sad. But I think why I believe change is so, it's at the grassroots level, it's a lot easier because, the two-party system, the legacy parties are, the funding and everything, it's crazy. But I constantly, and I've just brought on a new client who's the soon-to-be mayor of Florence, South Carolina. Her name is Peaches Barnes. But so she's also a minister. So she said, well, I talk to people about leading through love, and they look at me like I've got two heads. I'm like, I led through love and compassion for 9 years, and it works. But you have to constantly engage at the grassroots level so you keep your finger on the pulse. So I think a lot of people in elected office get siloed, and they think the vocal minority is really that's prevailing public opinion when it's not. So if you're not fully engaged as best you can be, I know it's harder as a governor or a lieutenant governor than it is as a mayor, but that constant grassroots engagement, you can actually keep your finger on the pulse.
One thing that really helped me in that regard was that I was actually in charge of being liaison to cities and towns. So I spent 1 day a week driving around. We had 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and I would go see 6 or 7 of them every Friday. We'd sit down with the police chief and the fire chief and the head of the schools and the mayor or the city council and say, what are your problems? What's going on in your communities? How can I help solve that at a state level? And that's what kept me grounded. And that's what kept me connected to the people of Massachusetts when I was there. And I think that's why we were able to solve a lot of things that, just never even became big problems because we saw them as smaller problems on the community level. And I love what you're saying about human dignity, because I think that's how the two major parties right now, have divided us. They have set up a system where they characterize the other party as impugning your human dignity. They're saying, like, they're not going to allow you to have the rights that you need as a human. These people want to deny you that. Or these folks on the other side, they want to take away the things that are genuinely yours. And they don't think that you have value as a human. They think you're a bad person. Not just that you have wrong ideas, but that you're a bad person. And when you set up that dynamic that you actually are impugning each other's human dignity, people respond really strongly, as if their life is being threatened.
It's one of the things that I've found, though, is so I was in Chicago a number of years ago when I was still in office speaking at the University of Chicago. And so I had a driver, and he said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm the mayor of Augusta, Georgia. And so we had that conversation. But I said, well, how's your mayor doing? Who at that point in time was Rahm Emanuel. And he said, well, he seems to be in the middle of everything. I said, well, are there cameras always around? And he said, oh, yeah. I said, well, that could be just that he has a good press agent. But I tell people, 95% of what I did when I was in office, there were no cameras around. So those staged press events don't build trust. But I found through constant grassroots engagement that it sort of inoculated me from the attacks of the vocal minority. Because once people get to know you, they're like, wait a minute, you're saying that about this guy that was, I was eating lunch with the other day, or, he was in my house, or he was walking in my neighborhood. That sort of inoculates you because people might want to paint you as a caricature, but they can't if you actually know the people you serve as best you can. And I love that you're the liaison to local governments. Our governor, Brian Kemp, is a good friend of mine. I'm not aware of him having somebody that position. So I will be making that recommendation to
I
him.
think it was a great, at first it felt like a curse, because everyone was so angry at me. We'd just done cuts to the local budgets.
Yeah.
And my purpose was to go out and figure out what we could do to help the cities short of giving them money. And so this was not a welcome conversation for many of the mayors, as you can imagine. But it is a great honor to go out and do that. And one of the things I like about our party right now, our Forward Party, is that we're asking our candidates to bring those grassroots issues to our attention and to form their whole campaigns around those issues that matter to their constituents on the grassroots level. I don't think we can go wrong if we do that.
No, I agree completely. And I had to educate somebody with regards to the Forward Party this week because I just had a op-ed that talked about what we do and how I applied sort of the principles locally while I was in office. But I had somebody say, well, a third party is just going to be a spoiler and but it's like, I think that's rhetoric that comes from the two legacy parties that, well, if there's a viable third party, it's going to benefit the other guys, not us.
That's right. It's always
And
the other guys. We can't benefit both other guys, can we?
no,
No,
no.
not actually. And what's so interesting to me is that your listeners probably don't know everything about Massachusetts politics because they're all over the country. But in Massachusetts, being a Republican, as I was and as Mitt Romney was, is very, very much a minority party. So the idea that we were elected as governor and lieutenant governor was almost a miracle. We only had 13% of the voter registration in Massachusetts at that time, and the reason why we were able to do that is because we were different kind of Republicans. We were,
Mm-hmm.
part of this whole New England Republican tradition, which was, led by Bill Weld and others, which
Mm-hmm.
was very open-minded about social issues and very pragmatic about financial issues and tried to, hold a strict line on spending, but also was very compassionate socially, very, comfortable with certainly gay rights and gay marriage and different views on abortion. But mostly, we just didn't feel that government should be involved in those spheres of our lives, that these are things that are very personal. And people can have all kinds of reasons, whether they're religious or just personal opinions, for holding strong views around social issues. And I don't think that matters in government. I think everyone should have the freedom to have their own religious views, their own social views. It's right there in our Constitution, that the government should not take sides on religion. We can all
Oh,
have
yeah.
religious views that we want. So I don't know why that hasn't been brought out more, that we as Americans have the right to have a diversity of views based on our faith.
Well, we truly are a melting pot. So I'm a Christian. I don't begrudge anybody else their faith tradition because I've got plenty of friends who are Muslims, friends who are Jewish, and I think I played on a tennis team when I was young, and we had two kids that were Muslims, two kids that were Jewish, some Christian kids. We won a championship, and so I've always been in sort of that situation. But America is a melting pot, and so one thing, and I want to get your take on this, that I do not understand. I'm happily politically independent, but Generation Z is the most diverse generation ever. That's just going to continue. The country's going to get more and more diverse, but yet the culture wars I'm like, what is that? I mean, how are you trying to attract a new generation of voters by just focusing on trying to divide around something like the culture wars?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to work.
No,
I think that it's going to be a worn out strategy. And I think that the Forward Party offers probably a welcome relief
I
to
agree
those
completely.
young people who are looking. When I go to Forward events, they are most often young people who are involved in some kind of tech work, perhaps, people who just want to solve problems like we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, and who really understand that the future is going to be complicated, and it can't be boiled down to a few culture war issues. That's not
No.
what impacts you every day. I mean, we have huge issues around climate. We have huge issues around how are we going to get enough energy to propel things like AI. Our needs are just getting bigger and bigger. It's not, riding a bicycle to work is not going to solve our energy problems in the future. And so we need to have an open mind. We have to be thinking about new kinds of technologies, new solutions for the country. And those are the kinds of, ideas and issues that animate young people. I don't think the culture wars does.
No, my campaign slogan the first year was a refreshing change. I was 37 years old, and I never went negative. I just kept people uplifted and tried to come up with solutions. But I think that the more that people find out about the Forward Party, particularly younger people, it's going to become more and more attractive. So I had did an interview with a local TV station, a news program, and the anchorman, the interviewer said, well, do you think that parents are going to be, upset with their kids going to the Forward Party? I said, I think there are going to be a whole lot of parents that find out about it and come with us as well. But so I have so enjoyed being plugged in with the Young Forwardists. I had Gabe McGuire, the president, on recently, but I believe, and this resonates with me. He said, look, I'm 18 years old. This is my first presidential election. All I've ever known from the legacy parties is toxic polarization. And he said, I think our generation deserves better. And I said, I agree totally. So I will work with you however we can make that happen. But I believe people deserve better than what the legacy parties are giving them.
Yeah. I had the chance to meet the founder of the Forward Party for the first time at a conference. I heard Andrew Yang speak, and he was talking about his book. Where he first talked about the principles of Forward. And I met him, and I told my kids that I met this really interesting person. I enjoyed meeting him. I think I'd like to work with him politically. And it was the first time my kids and I had ever been on the same page politically. They were so excited, and they were like, "Oh, Mom," and in the past they were always saying, "Oh, we're very embarrassed about your political involvement. We're very concerned," etc. And finally, when it came to Forward, they were like, "Oh, okay. Good. Yes, this is something that we can support." So my sense is that if it appeals to people like you and like me, and it also appeals to our kids and people who are even younger than our kids, then maybe we're on the right path to literally lead the country forward.
No, I think we are completely. And, I think the Forward Party is very, very cool, because I think bringing people together on common ground, it's like, we're like putting on a concert for America where everybody's invited to see this great band, and we all just get together and it's fun and uplifting, and we work together to solve problems. I'm like, that is so much more attractive of an alternative than what we're seeing in the ugliness of the extreme politics. It's just even, I think it's great. It seems like the DNC convention has been energetic, but it's still, the two legacy parties, even if you get energy around the campaign, you guys put us in this situation. And I think Andrew Yang, on his behalf, not the Forward parties, but wrote a great op-ed in Newsweek saying if the Democratic ticket wins, unless they start to reform our political system, what difference does it ultimately make?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Some people have said to me, okay, well, if the election goes this way or that way, will the Forward Party disband? Will you not be needed anymore? And absolutely will be needed no matter what the outcome of the election is in November, because first of all, we need to keep the two main parties honest. And secondly, we need to step away from this polarization as a way and this entertainment as a way of driving politics. And I think we all can say that it was very upbeat, last night on the Democratic convention when we were watching that. But it was entertainment to some degree. And you know what? I miss the seriousness. I miss people saying, this is serious business. We are the leader of the world. America is, whether they want to be or not. And the question is, how are we going to do it? With what principles, with what values, with what gravitas are we going to be able to execute our immense responsibility to not only the people here in America, but around the world?
Let me ask you this. I've got a good friend who's a minister and an accountant, and he plays in a band too. Great guy. I've got a lot of interesting
I
friends.
wish I could do all those things, but
Yeah,
no.
I need to introduce you to. But we were talking about it the other day. So, the massive wealth in the U.S., we are the wealthiest country, but we've got all this depression. We've got all these, mental illness is running rampant, suicide. So it's like to a degree, and this kind of gets into faith, but I'm like, and I think politics is part of this, saying that, that money and power and prestige are the things that should matter most in life. That's where, that's what's going to lead to happiness. I argue that that's not the case, but it's just, to me, I grew up with a World War II veteran for a dad who taught me it was a very good thing to be a gentleman. And I think it's not, being a part of a community and being a contributing part of a family, where I think that's what Ford can develop into, is kind of more of a family atmosphere. But it's just, it's so many things in today's world just put the impetus on the money and the power and the prestige. And I'm like, I think we kind of need a shift back to sort of the values of integrity and, treating each other with dignity and respect. That's what I love, because that's central to Forward.
Yeah, it is, and I think that as you said so beautifully, worshiping those things, worshiping money, worshiping power, they will lead you to a very unhappy life.
Yes,
And so, what we need to do as politicians and people who are involved in politics is to try to exemplify other values, to try
exactly.
to give an example for young people about how you can live your life with integrity, with optimism, with
Exactly.
some sort of dedication to your community, some sense of responsibility for what you do in your life. And if you can do those things, then other people will not be so depressed. They will not look at the world
Exactly.
through all this negativity that is being poured into our media right now, which makes people feel hopeless. It really makes people feel as if others hate them, others are out to get them, others are going to harm them if they become empowered in some way. And yet we should be able to step back to an era where we disagreed politically, but we knew that everyone had the same underlying values and goals for governance. Everyone wanted the whole country to prosper. We just had different ideas about how to go about that. And, everyone wanted America to lead the world, but we might have different views on how to accomplish that, or how to do that most peacefully. So we're at a really critical juncture right now where we need to offer another alternative, not a third alternative, honestly, just a second alternative
Yeah.
to people who want to participate in politics. Because right now, the two main parties offer the same thing, which is fear and hatred and polarization and entertainment. And we don't need any of that in politics. We need exactly the opposite.
No, well, I'll tell you, as I say, I've been thrilled to work with the young Fordists, because I told Gabe, I said, this is like an energy loop. I hope I'm providing you energy and showing, in 20 years of doing positive politics, we've run 4 campaigns with an average of 64.75% of the vote. So you are on the right path. You can win elections with that. But I've told him, and I'm like, but you give me energy through your enthusiasm, your positivity, and all this. But I've told him, I almost feel like, so my dad flew B-17 bombers in World War II at the age of 18. So I think of all these teenagers that were over there doing that. I'm like, you guys, don't let anybody tell you because you're teenagers, you can't do great things, because you can. That generation did. But I thought they were called to protect our democracy. They were called into a war. I said, I honestly believe your generation, you're being called to public service. Young people in America rose up, served their country. I'm like, you guys, your generation can do that based around public service. And I think the Ford Party can get you there, But I don't think either legacy party is going to reform themselves. And if you're indoctrinated into the same system, how are we going to get any change?
Yeah. Well, my dad was also on World War II, so I grew up with those same stories and that kind of attitude toward public service. But when you talk to military leaders today, the young men and women in the military today are just the same.
Oh, I
They are
know.
taking on incredible responsibility. They are so patriotic. They are so self-sacrificing that, we need more of those individuals in office. One of our most amazing candidates that we have running as a forwardist, who's running for Congress right now, is a woman called Shalane Etchison, and she's in North Carolina. She's running against the head of fundraising for the Republican Party, who's, and so the likelihood that she's going to have more money in that campaign than he does is very unlikely. But she is a veteran. She was in special forces. She was in the Army. She's married to an Air Force pilot. And she is brave and smart and patriotic. And if we can attract more candidates like Shalane, we will win, and we will restore that sense of integrity and honesty and hard work to public service that really needs to be there.
No, she is so impressive. I want to have her on the podcast.
Yes.
But when I tell people about her, they're like, oh my gosh, there's somebody like that that's right. And you didn't mention the fact that she's also got 2 graduate degrees from Harvard. So
Yeah, I
she's
mentioned
obviously
I
very
forgot that.
intelligent
Yes.
along with, but no, that you're right. Those are the young leaders we need to hold up. And I am so proud to say that Ford endorsed her. And I just,
And
but
Ford would be a great home for veterans of all ages, really, because people who served in the military were accustomed to being independent, right?
exactly.
They were going to follow the commander in chief, whether that commander in chief was from one party or from another, and they always had their heads on straight about what was the point. The point was service above self. And the point was the best interest of the country. And so those are the kinds of folks who I think, we have something to offer. And also we would love to see them as candidates at all levels of government. We should mention that we are looking for Fordists to run for school board, for city council, for mayor, for state legislatures, for statewide offices, and for Congress, all of those things.
Well, I will be out there helping you recruit that. But to me, I've always been a free thinker. I've never fit well within a box. And I'm like, that's part of what doesn't appeal to me about the legacy parties is don't want to be told what I have to think. You have to adhere to this rigid political ideology. That's what I love about Ford is we're not saying you need to swear fealty. We're encouraging dialogue and debate and how do we solve problems. That to me that's much more, fertile ground to get to a point of solutions, which we as a nation desperately need now. And I think about it, I'm like, okay, public servants, their focus should be and always is to engage and inform. But I think politicians enrage and inflame. And I'm like, I'd rather be with the team that engages and informs.
You're not alone in wanting to be a free thinker and wanting to be an independent. Most people don't realize that now a majority of voters, just a little bit over 50% of all voters, depending on who you're talking to, are independents now.
Yeah.
They are not Republicans. They are not Democrats. They want to be independent voters. And an increasing number of young people, when they go to register, they don't want to register for one of the legacy parties.
No.
They want something new. So we have more people as independents than we have as either Republicans or Democrats. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all going to be Fordists, but it does
No.
mean that there's a large group of people out there who are unhappy with the way things are. And if we can build a party worthy of them, they will come.
Well, and this is interesting. And I know you've got a busy schedule, but I do want to ask you about this. I think both parties talk about voter suppression.
Mm.
And so I'm like, so I'm happily independent. And I often forget that if I pull an independent ballot here, which I did this summer, I didn't need, okay, municipal officials are nonpartisan. Our sheriffs, our judges are partisan elections. So I pulled the independent. I couldn't vote in the sheriff's race, which is a very important local race. But
Mhm.
I thought, well, let's talk about independent voters being suppressed because that's really we are being shut out of the system.
Absolutely. And in some states, for example, to run as an independent, you may have to collect 10 times the number of signatures that you would if you were a Democrat or a
Yeah.
Republican. The legacy parties have passed laws that say we're inside the walls, let's close the door and keep everybody else out. So the idea of open primaries, the only way I ever got elected or any Republican ever got elected in Massachusetts was that we now have, for example, 60% independent voters. And if you are an independent voter in Massachusetts, because you have an open primary, you could pull either the Republican or the Democratic ballot in a primary to make your vote count. So in Massachusetts, the situation you encountered wouldn't exist because we already have open primaries, and it allows people to have a greater choice and to put their vote where they want it to be. But most states don't have that. And so we've been working as a party, as the Forward Party, on creating more open primary states, more states where there is ranked choice voting, states where there are laws against gerrymandering, so that you just end up in a Democratic district and it doesn't matter, or a Republican district and it doesn't matter what your view is, you're going to get that kind of outcome. Um, and trying to figure out how do we reform democracy so that it includes everyone, so
Yeah.
that everyone has a chance to literally feel like their vote works. And there are any number of things, whether it's reforms to the electoral college eventually that will have to happen so that we don't end up with president after president who maybe did not receive the
Yeah.
actual majority of the votes cast. So we have a lot of things out there that we need to look at. But a lot of people will say, and I think it's true, that for a party like Forward to truly succeed, we're going to have strength within the state legislatures to open up those primary systems so that everyone has a fair chance.
Well, so the campaign that I ran, and we'll close out in a second, the Augusta Stronger Together campaign, we consolidated 28 years ago in 1996. The voters have had no input into how our government functions in 28 years. And so we've had dysfunctional government. I was able to work around it a little bit. I had worked with our commission and run the green space program and built consensus. But our mayor, who is a dear friend of mine, when people said, why should people vote for this? And we explained all the usual reasons, but then he would just say, well, if you're satisfied with the government you've had for the past 28 years and the way it functions, vote no. But if you're not satisfied, vote yes. And so I think as more people, we are giving that alternative to vote yes, not to vote no, that I'm going to protect myself against the evil, the demon on the other side. We're getting a chance to have people stand in solidarity and say, yes, we want to be a part of this. We are tired of this back and forth and not solving issues. I am so excited when I've never been a member of a party in my life to be a part of the Forward Party. So that's saying a lot.
That is saying a lot. And you raised a really important point right there at the end, which was, we are not in the business of not solving problems. We don't
No.
want to nurture problems so that we can use them on election years to polarize people and make them feel worse and worse about the way America is going. We need to actually solve the issues at the border. We need to actually find solutions to legal immigration and make that functional. And there's no reason why either party couldn't have done that anywhere along the way for the last 20 years or
No.
more. That could have been taken care of with a little bit of desire to actually put the solution ahead of nurturing that problem. And problem after problem in the country falls into that category. There are things that we should have been doing to make sure that people had health care, that when people had affordable health care, that they had high quality health care. We did it in Massachusetts. We didn't raise taxes to do it. Why on earth are we not able to do that same thing for everyone in this country when 60% of all the bankruptcies in the country come from medical debt? People
Exactly.
need help on these basic issues, and no one really wants to solve these problems because it's so fun to talk about them during election years.
Uh,
And we will not talk about them. We will actually try to solve them.
well, and I will say, in the 4 campaigns I've been a part of here in Augusta, 3 as a candidate for mayor, 1 running this ballot referendum campaign that incidentally passed with 74%. We employed the principles of the Forward Party before there was a Forward Party when I was running for office, but before I became a part of it. And so people will go to an alternative and a positive alternative. I'm like, if all you offer people is junk food, that's all they're going to have, and they're going to be very unhealthy. But if you offer them a healthy alternative, which is what I think we're doing, which also I think is cool, and not negative and not just I don't want to be around the mean kids that much. But I know in my heart the Forward Party is going to be successful, and I'm so glad to have the opportunity to work with you and everybody else there, because this is what we need. So God bless you for standing up and saying, I want to be a part of this, standing with the leaders you're standing with. It's totally inspiring to me. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Deke, and thank you for everything that you've done for your community throughout your career. And thank you for joining us now. And I believe that your optimism and your positive nature is going to be something that will really help us reach out to people of all ages and all communities and backgrounds and get the message out. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. 2 questions on the way out, though. First,
Okay.
where can people find you?
They can find me just at the website on the forwardparty.com website, and you can contact us, and I will get back to you.
Okay. My last question,
Yeah.
on a daily basis, what puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
Oh, well, my kids, of course. I have grown-up kids, and I still love them more and more every day. And I love to see every year of their development. It's wonderful to see the great adults they've become.
Well, I love that y'all can both be excited. I'll be excited about being a part of the same political party, because when the families are splitting the other way, we need a party like this that people can come together around. So God bless you for all that you do. Thank you for being an amazing guest.
Thank you, Deke. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. That's all the time we've got. Dropping the mic, and we are out.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.